At my school, there's a club that sells plants and handmade jewelry to raise funds in order to build water wells near schools in India. The teachers in charge told us a story of how students whose school had no drinking water nearby had to walk 2 kilometers every day to get a jar of water before class. While researching what I was going to say today, I found a statement that made me think about those students. Limited natural resources, such as drinking water, are likely to become even scarcer in many parts of the world, and that was influenced by climate change. It got me thinking, those students have enough trouble getting water as it is. What would happen if it became even scarcer? That's why I want to tell you about what climate change is doing and why we must act. By not preventing climate change, we are endangering lives. Climate change renders extreme weather more likely and more damaging. In other words, while extreme weather has always been present, it is becoming more regular and more severe because of our inaction. In fact, in a study of more than 300 extreme weather events, 69% were influenced by human activity. We, because of our decisions, either made those events more likely, more damaging, or both. The most common natural phenomenon affected by climate change are heat waves. But there are others as well: droughts, heavy rain, wildfires, floods, and even tropical cyclones like hurricanes. These are all natural disasters that are becoming more and more dangerous because of climate change. These disasters are terrible enough as they are. They cause destruction and death whenever they happen, and they leave their mark for long after they struck. They destroy homes, throw families into food insecurity, cause starvation, and more. All of those harmful impacts force people to flee their homes to survive. The family whose house was destroyed during a wildfire, a hurricane, or a flood has to abandon the place they called home because it was destroyed. The farmer whose crops and livestock are threatened by drought or flood have, has to try to move to find a better place to grow what allows him to survive. And sure, these disasters happened before climate change had become so influential. But by not acting, we are making them happen and damage more. In 2017, there were 18.8 million disaster-related internal displacements. 18.8 million people who had to leave their home because of natural disasters. Those are already too many. We must not make the number larger by allowing climate change to get worse. Finally, right now, being Advent, I'd like to close with a comparison of right now's event on climate change and the birth of Jesus. As I said before, climate change is worsening natural disasters and forcing many people to abandon or flee their homes. It's a situation that resembles Jesus's. His family had to flee from their home to escape the slaughter that King Herod had ordered on all children younger than 2. It may not have been because of a natural disaster, but both Jesus' family and the people who flee their homes because of climate change right now are escaping a place that has become too dangerous. Jesus says Jesus says to feed the hungry, but first let's prevent as many people as we can from being hungry by limiting the disasters that ruin their crops or livestock. He also says to clothe the naked, but let's do our best to make sure the least amount of people are in need of clothing by preventing as many disasters as
in the night, and they'd sleep in their little mud huts, which didn't have windows; they just had squares in them. And so, what St. Nicholas would do, because the situation was that the daughters of these peasants didn't have what was a dowry. In those days, women had no value whatsoever, and it was what they possessed or what came with them that gave them the value. So, if a woman had, 3 oxen and 10 acres of land, she had value that made her valuable for their man to marry her. And of course, the man got all the oxen and the property, the land. And so, because these women didn't have that, if they didn't have a dowry and get married, very often they had to turn to prostitution or some other form of existence, which was really degrading to them. So, what St. Nicholas did, he would take gold coins and he would put them into the stocks. And when the morning the men would come out, the fathers would come out, they'd see them and they'd say, "Oh, hey, we now have a dowry for our daughter." That's where the tradition of hanging stocks over a fireplace comes from. Obviously, his reputation went further north into Germany and into France and up into the Scandinavian countries. And originally he was dressed something like myself with a sort of a corn or an acorn hat and a crozier. So that would be his original look. If you look at some of the depictions of him in, say, Denmark and so on, they have him in that fashion, very thin with a crozier and an acorn hat. But as he went into the Scandinavian countries, in the Scandinavian countries, his reputation, there they worshipped the god of Thor, the god Thor, who went through the skies in a wagon being pulled by goats. And because they were in Scandinavia where there was snow and they had sleighs, then the Laplanders changed that from goats and a wagon to a sleigh and reindeer. And that was how he's depicted a few hundred years after his death. However, the major change in St. Nicholas, or Santa Claus as he is known, came when his reputation went to North America. And Coca-Cola got hold of this idea that Santa Claus could sell more Coca-Cola for them, so they changed his color from white to the color of Coca-Cola. And there was a poem, Jolly Old Santa, which depicted Santa as rotund and wearing red and fur with a big white beard. And that poem was so indicative of changing the mode or the form or the model of St. Nicholas that that's the St. Nicholas we have today. But the original St. Nicholas lived around 346 AD or Common Era CE, and he was a Roman Catholic bishop in Turkey who took care of the poor and was one of the first advocates to take care of the dignity of women.
In those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be registered. This was the first registration and was taken while Quirinius was governor of Syria. All went to their own towns to be registered. Joseph also went from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to the city of David called Bethlehem, because he was descended from the house and family of David. He went to be registered with Mary, to whom he was engaged and who was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for her to deliver her child. And she gave birth to her firstborn son, and wrapped him in swaddling clothes, and laid him in a manger, because there was no place for them in the inn. In that region, there were shepherds living in the fields, keeping watch over their flock by night. Then an angel of the Lord stood before them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified. But the angel said to them, "Do not be afraid, for see, I am bringing you good news of great joy for all the people. To you is born this day in the city of David a Savior, who is Christ the Lord. This will be a sign for you. You will find a child wrapped in swaddling clothes and lying in a manger." And suddenly there was an angel and a multitude of the heavenly host, praising God and singing, "In excelsis Deo, Gloria, in excelsis Deo." When the angels had left them and gone into heaven, the shepherds said to one another, "Let us go now to Bethlehem and see this thing that has taken place, which the Lord has made known to us." So they went with haste and found Mary and Joseph and the child lying in the manger.
Oh, holy night, the stars are brightly shining. It is the night of our dear Savior's birth. Long lay the world in sin and error pining, till he appeared and their soul felt its worth. A thrill of hope, the weary world rejoices, for yonder breaks a new and glorious morn. For knees, oh, hear the angel voices, oh, night divine, oh, night when Christ was born. Chain shall he break, for this slave is a brother, and in his name all oppression shall cease. Sweet hymns of joy in grateful chorus Christ is the Lord. Let us